Hey everyone, Mrs. Horn here. I have some information today on the circulatory system, which is the beginning of chapter 42. Our focus is on homeostasis and how your health or the health of an organism is very dependent on the transport and the gas exchange of materials inside an organism. We're going to start off comparing our system to that of a grasshopper, which has an open circulatory system, very different from ours. Then we'll work into the details of a human cardiovascular system. We're going to diagram out the flow of blood in the body and in the heart, talk about the cardiac cycle, how to measure blood pressure, and then we'll talk about the components that make up blood, and then finally what could go wrong. What are some things that could fail if this system is not working properly? So let's start off with talking about an open circulatory system. This is not what humans have. It's different from our system in that the organs in this type of a system are always bathed in fluid. The fluid is a combination of blood and interstitial fluid, which as humans we have both blood and interstitial fluid, but they're separate. In an open system they are combined and it's called hemolymph. Insects and a lot of mollusks like clams have open circulatory systems. They do have a heart, in some cases more than one heart, and it will pump that hemolymph into the spaces that surround their organs. The heart is a tubular structure, so it's not one like ours that has 4 chambers, but more of a tubed heart, a very small structure that will pump this hemolymph in one direction. A closed circulatory system is where blood is separate from the interstitial fluid. Blood is confined to veins, arteries, capillaries. The heart will pump the blood into the vessels that go directly to organs. The material that goes into the blood is exchanged by diffusion. So in your body, oxygen will diffuse into the blood in the lungs. In the digestive system, the diffusion takes place in the villi of the small intestine. So those nutrients will diffuse from the villi into the blood at that part of the system. Earthworms have a closed circulatory system along with vertebrates. And you have a picture in your packet, and I think it's right over here. Yep, you have a picture of the difference between an open and a closed. The grasshopper is a good example of an open. And then the closed, we have a grasshopper here, and we'll get to the human in a minute, but an earthworm. An earthworm has an example of a closed. They actually have not even one heart, but they have these aortic arches are what they called in an earthworm. And there's multiple little hearts in here that are helping to circulate that blood. Now, in our system, in humans and invertebrates, we call it the cardiovascular system. And in this cardiovascular system, it consists of a heart with atrium chambers and ventricle chambers. There are arteries, there are veins, there are arterioles, there are venules, and then there are really smallest blood vessels of all called capillaries. And capillaries are where any and all diffusion is going to take place. So when I was mentioning before how oxygen or nutrients are going to diffuse into the blood, that happens at the capillaries. And the capillaries are so small that the blood cells are going through there almost at a single file formation, really, really small. In a cardiovascular system, the blood will move away from the heart and artery. So remember, artery starts with the letter A, and so does the word away. So blood moves away in an artery, and then as those vessels get a little bit smaller, they become arterioles, and then as they become really, really small, they become capillaries. Now getting that blood back to the heart is going to come back in a capillary, and then it will get a little bit bigger in the venules, and then the really, really big veins are going to deliver that blood directly to the heart. If the inferior or superior vena cava are the biggest veins of the body, and if you've taken anatomy, you already know that. There are two types of circulation in the body, systemic circulation and pulmonary circulation. Systemic circulation has the word system in it, so think whole system, think whole body. This is when the blood will move from the heart to every part of your body, so all the way up to the brain, to every muscle, to your digestive system, to everything except the lungs. That is just the pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary circulation is when blood goes from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart. So systemic is everything, pulmonary is just the lungs. And here's a nice picture of this, and you do not have this labeled in your packet, so you are going to want to pause this video for a minute and get all the details. Please make sure that you number everything. I'm going to walk you through it right now. We're starting here in the right ventricle. You can remember that the atriums are on top and the ventricles are on bottom because the atrium starts with the letter A, and that's at the top of the alphabet. So atriums are at the top and ventricles with the letter V are at the bottom of the alphabet. We'll start with the right ventricle. From there, blood will move through through this vein. It's a pulmonary artery because it's moving away from the heart. And this artery is going to take the blood to the lungs. The little vessels are called capillaries. It's going to pick up oxygen, and then as it heads back to the heart, you'll notice that in this diagram it's shaded as red, which means it's oxygenated blood. So the pulmonary vein will bring oxygenated blood back to the left atrium. From the left atrium, it's going to go into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it's going to exit the heart through the biggest artery of the body, which is your aorta. And this is where our systemic circulation picks up. So the aorta will bring the blood, it will deliver it to the entire upper part of the body in those capillaries and the entire lower part of the body in those capillaries. After it drops off a lot of oxygen, it's going to bring the blood back through the anterior vena cava, which will bring it back from the upper half of the body. Or if it's coming from the lower half of the body, that would be the posterior vena cava, or the inferior vena cava, it's also called. And it's going to dump all of that very deoxygenated blood into the right atrium, and then we're back in the right ventricle and it starts all over again. Now, in every diagram you've ever seen, they always color the blood blue and red. Blue always represents the deoxygenated blood, and the red has oxygenated. Please know that blood is not actually blue. Blood is blood. Blood is always red. It might be a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, but there's no such thing as blue blood. Even though it doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it, it is still red blood. And the next diagram that you have in your packet is the diagram of the heart. You may want to pause it so that you can get everything labeled on here. Some of the structures are the same as what you saw in the last diagram, but the addition is now I'm showing you all of the valves. So there's a valve in between the ventricles. Here's the right atrium. In the atrium and the right ventricle. This valve here is called the AV valve, or the atrioventricular valve. We also have another valve here before it leaves out the pulmonary artery. It's called the semilunar valve. There's another semilunar valve on the other side of the heart before the blood will leave the left ventricle to the aorta. There's another semilunar valve. And there's another AV valve on the left side of the heart. And I think I've covered all the valves. So everything else we labeled on the other diagram, but I still want you to relabel everything on here and make sure you put the arrows, because knowing the flow of blood. Sorry for the pause there. I actually forgot what I was saying. I was interrupted by announcements. Again, just make sure you have all of the arrows on there so that you know the flow of blood. And the next thing I'm going to show you is not a picture in the packet, but actually after you've copied all of that, close your packet and see if you can figure out what everything is without looking. So pause your video right now and give yourself a second to see if you can label them all, and then play it, and I'll have all the answers there. Okay, so how'd you do? We have the aorta, we have the vena cava. From the right atrium, blood is going to go into the right ventricle. On the other side of the diagram, the left ventricle, the left atrium, the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary artery. So just a little quiz for you to see how you did. The next section of notes gets us to our cardiac cycle, and this teaches us how the pumping and the contracting and the relaxing of the heart help to pump the blood. The sequence of pumping and filling the heart with blood, this is what makes up the cardiac cycle. The two most important words that we have to know here are systole and diastole. And systole means to contract, and diastole means to relax. Now you have to fill in this diagram in your packet, and we're going to start over here with number 1, and this is showing us the atrial and ventricular diastole, which means they are both relaxing, and as they relax, the AV valves are open and blood is going to pour in to both the atriums and the ventricle. Blood is coming in to every chamber. The semilunar valves are closed at this point, so nothing's leaving the heart, just everything is coming into the heart. The second part of our cycle is that the atriums are going to contract, and the ventricles are going to stay relaxed. So the atriums, which are the upper chambers of the heart, they're going to squeeze, and they're going to squeeze the blood down into the ventricles. The third step would be that the ventricles are now going to contract and the atriums are going to relax. So they're taking turns. So as the bottom part of the heart is going to squeeze, that muscle will contract and it's going to push the blood out through the pulmonary artery and also through the aorta, so it can continue its systemic and its pulmonary circulation. And then the cycle will start all over again. I did find a video, it's about 1.5 minutes long, it's on YouTube, and all I did was type in cardiac cycle, and there are some really short videos out there that will walk you through some animations. The guy's voice is not super exciting, and I'm trying to make my video not too long, but if you wanted to go to YouTube and check out and look for this one, it's very good. On the next page of your packet, so I'm on page 12, we're talking about controlling the rhythm of the heart. And in the diagram, you have what's called an SA node, which is also known as a pacemaker. You have a natural pacemaker in your heart, and this is the section of your heart that's going to generate an electric signal. Now that signal made by that node is going to make the atriums contract. That signal will be paused, and then the blood will empty into the bottom chambers, those ventricles. Also, that you'll see in the diagram, there are some Purkinje fibers or bundle branches, and they will conduct that signal out to the apex of the heart. So the signal that starts in the SA node is going to move like an electric impulse through the heart, and these Purkinje fibers are going to bring that signal right out to the apex of the heart, which is the base of the heart, and through the ventricles, which are going to drive the blood into the arteries. Okay, the diagram I was referring to is MIA. I'm not really sure where it is. Sorry about that, but it is in your textbook. It's figure 42.7, and it has all these structures labeled. There's the SA node, there's the Purkinje fibers, the apex is labeled on there, and it shows, it walks you through step by step. These 4 steps that I have written here, the diagram does go really well with this, and it walks you through how that impulse travels through the heart. So let's move over to measuring blood pressure and what blood pressure means. The average blood pressure is around 120/70. Now that's average, so if you're a little higher than that, a little lower than that, it's okay. The units of measurements are millimeters of mercury. 120 the number 120 means that that pressure can support a column of mercury 120 millimeters high. So that's where those numbers come from. A sphygmomanometer is the device that's going to measure the blood pressure in the artery. We do have the diagram for this one, and it's going to show us how to use the cuff. The first step would be to put the cuff on, and you're going to pump up that little bulb at the end, and you pump it up so that the pressure will actually close the artery. So you're stopping the blood from moving through there. The doctor typically uses a stethoscope and puts it kind of right under the cuff a little bit, and it's going to listen for the sounds of blood below the cuff. When they turn that silver knob a little bit and they let some of the air out, then the blood is going to start to flow through. And as soon as they hear that blood moving, that is your systolic pressure. That is that upper number. That's that, hopefully around the 120. And then as they continue to loosen the cuff and loosen it, the blood is going to flow through at a faster rate. And then that is going to be your diastole number. That's going to be the last number that you hear when that sound stops. So you're going to hear like a ticking or a thud through there, and when the noise stops, then that reading is the lowest number on the cuff. Blood is made up of 4 main things. It's made up of plasma, which plasma has a bunch of stuff in it, but plasma makes up more than half of blood. The other things that we would find in blood are going to be the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and then the platelets, and all of those things have their individual functions. You have a blank diagram on page 14, so you have to fill a bunch of this stuff in. The plasma chart is not really important that you get every single thing on there, but you should know that the plasma is made up of mostly water, and its function is simply to be fluid and to help carry substances. I want you to put on there that there are lots of ions in here, and the purpose of those is to keep the water balance consistent and keep the consistency of the blood always the same. Please write that there are plasma proteins in there, and those proteins will help in defending and clotting and keeping, again, that water balance in the blood. And then the last thing that makes up the plasma are the things that the blood is actually carrying. So things like food or waste products or hormones, that is all part of the plasma as well. Now in the other half of the blood, we have the erythrocytes, which are the red blood cells. We have about 5 to 6 million of them for every millimeter cubed of blood. And their function is very important, and they're going to help transport oxygen and help transport carbon dioxide. Then we also have the leukocytes, which are the white blood cells. I'm showing 5 different kinds of white blood cells right now. When we get to the immune system, you'll learn that all these 5 have very specific jobs that they're supposed to do. But for now, I need you to know that their function is to defend the body. And then the last component of the blood, and there's not many of these, but they're called platelets, and their whole function is to clot the blood. You don't have a ton of them in your body at all times, but when there is a cut, they all messages are sent, and they kind of go to where they are. They go to where they're needed. The last section here focuses on cardiovascular diseases. So if homeostasis fails, here are some things that could be happening. It could be a heart attack, and a heart attack is caused by a blockage of that coronary artery. Coronary artery is an artery that delivers all nutrients directly to the heart. So if you're going to block that, then that cardiac muscle isn't getting the nutrients that it needs, and it could die, and that's what causes the heart attack. A stroke is where there's a blockage of an artery in the head and causes death of some of the nerve tissue that's in the brain. Atherosclerosis is where plaque will grow on the walls of the arteries, making the openings a lot more narrow and harder for blood to move through. This could lead to other things, so it could lead to a heart attack, it could lead to a stroke. And the last thing on here, and probably one of the easier things to control, would be hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and this this can lead to all of these other things on here. So it's very important that you get that maintained, which is very easily controlled by medication. And the last thing I have on here, which is just for kicks, and you don't have to listen to this or watch this if you don't want to, but I found a very funny but very educational and useful song about the circulatory system, which there are tons of these things on YouTube. But if you want to check it out, hop on YouTube and type in the circulatory song, and here's just a tidbit.
Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries are the reason, veins are the same. The circulation is the name of the game. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries are the reason, veins are the same. The circulation is the name of the game. Start from the heart, cause that seems smart. It's not hard to see, that is the most important part. The first step is to gather up oxygen, sends blood to the lungs, back to the heart again. Next up, we'll talk about the arteries.
Check it out on YouTube to get the rest. Hope this helps.